Hanging out here. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Murti. I'm Executive Director of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, or SSDP. Since 1998, SSDP has built the largest grassroots network working to replace the war on drugs with policies rooted in science, compassion, and human rights. I've been involved, but for me, I've been involved in the liberty movement for a little bit over 2 decades now. And many of you may know me from my work at the Cato Institute or Cannabis, Ladies of Liberty Alliance, Feminists for Liberty, many of the other wonderful organizations that have been here at the conference this weekend. And I took over as Executive Director of SSDP a couple of years ago. I've been on the board for a long time. I joined as a student. And SSDP is not a liberty organization. We are nonpartisan. We work with folks across the political spectrum. But the work that I do with SSDP, despite over 2 decades of working in the liberty movement, on a day-to-day basis, I feel like I do more for individual liberty. Because across the political spectrum, there's one thing that is very clear that we can all agree on, and that's that war on drugs is a war on all of us. It is a war on our individual liberties, and there's perhaps no greater intrusion upon self-ownership, upon free markets, upon the right of free people to live as they want to live than the war on drugs. For more than half a century, it's fueled one of the greatest expansions of government power in modern American history. Civil asset forfeiture, no-knock raids, warrantless surveillance, excessive mandatory minimums, and the imprisonment of peaceful people for conduct that in many cases is now legal in much of the country. If we believe in limited government, in due process, in individual responsibility, and in equal justice under the law, then ending the excesses of the war on drugs should unite us across the political spectrum. So that brings us to today's conversation. The Constitution gives the President one of its most important checks on government overreach, the power of executive clemency. President Trump used that power a lot during his first term to grant mercy to Americans serving excessive sentences for nonviolent drug offenses, reuniting families, and restoring opportunity. In fact, he's used it more than any other modern president. But that work is not finished. While legal cannabis is now a multi-billion dollar industry in America, there's still nearly 3,000 people who are locked up in federal prison for long-term or life sentences for cannabis-related offenses. Many of those people were prosecuted under policies that Americans have since rejected. We still have people going to jail every single day. There's 200,000 arrests just last year, and there's so many people who are still locked up for something that is legal in most of the country and that Americans, both left and right, agree should be legal. So over the past few years, SSDP has worked alongside an incredible coalition of organizations, members of Congress, and formerly incarcerated advocates to keep these stories in front of policymakers. We've organized congressional briefings, we've held press conferences, we've met with lawmakers, and we've elevated the voices of those who experience some of the harshest consequences of the war on drugs. Most recently, we've launched a bipartisan letter asking President Trump to build on the clemency legacy that he began by granting mercy to those who remain in prison for federal cannabis offenses. Because if you agree that justice should not depend on what decade in which someone was sentenced, if you believe that someone should not be in jail for a plant, and if you believe that no one should be locked away for life for a non-violent crime that never should have been a crime in the first place, I hope you're going to sign this letter before the end of today. I'm especially honored to
How you doing today? I'm Jimmy Romans. I received a life sentence in the federal system back in 2010. I served 11 years of that sentence, and then on President Trump's last day of his first term, he granted me presidential clemency, and I was able to go home that day. So ever since then, I've been working, paying taxes, being with my family. So I'm here fighting for, like he said, there's other men in there that's been in there. One of my co-defendants is still in there. And he's got very bad health issues, and there's more men like that. And like she said, down the street from some of these facilities that are holding marijuana prisoners, you can go in and buy whatever you want, walk out with a receipt. And that don't make sense. So we're just trying to push the issue and get these men home where they belong. Non-violent offense, I received a life sentence. First offense. It's ridiculous.
Hi, I'm Lyn Ulbricht. My alternate identity is Ross Ulbricht's mother. He was sentenced for non-violent charges, first-time offender, to double life plus 40 years with no parole. Because in the federal system, there's no parole. So, thank God, we started a movement, made a lot of noise, got President Trump's attention, and he pardoned Ross a year and a half ago. But there's still, as has been said, a lot of people remain. And I got to know a lot of them, of course Ross does. And I just want to read something Ross, it's a quote from a speech he made here at FreedomFest last year. He says, "I can safely say that the majority of prisoners, easily more than half, have no business being in those cages. They are decent men, they are not an imminent threat to anybody, and can be safely released." So we have over 60%, I think it is, of non-violent offenders, mostly drugs, they are in cages essentially. And this is costing billions of dollars and to keep them, and of course destroying their lives, their families' lives, and the lives of many in communities. And it really needs to stop. This is wrong. It's a violation of the 8th Amendment of the Bill of Rights, our Constitution, which prohibits cruel punishment. This is cruel and it's wrong, and so we want to call attention to it and make it stop.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked a little bit about, there's close to 3,000 people just for cannabis at the federal level. There's so many more people for other drug-related crimes. There was over 200,000 arrests last year in this country for cannabis, many of them in places that have legalized. 92% of those were for simple possession, so it's still going on. This drug war still happening. Tell us about who's behind bars, who's locked up.
I can tell you a list I've been working with. Edwin Rubis, he's been in prison 28 years now on a marijuana conspiracy. There's another guy, Michael Woods from Canada. He received a life sentence. He's been in there like 13 years. So these are, Michael Woods is the first-time offender. Edwin Rubis is a non-violent offender. And the interesting part about Edwin Rubis' case is he received a 40-year sentence after going to trial. And his co-defendant received a 20-year sentence, but his co-defendant was the leader of the organization. Edwin was just a driver. And interestingly enough, Edwin was a Hispanic male, and the leader was a white male. So there's a lot of things back in 1998, maybe a little differently thinking.
Still now.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of people trapped in the system, and I would say that's a good one. And there's another one I think of. Ishmael Lira, he has a life sentence from cannabis marijuana. They call it, America has changed the name of marijuana to cannabis to sweep away some of these horrible cases and miscarriages of justice that have happened behind marijuana for a long time. But Ishmael Lira, he's coming close to being incarcerated 20 years now on a life sentence. And they don't have it. If you look these people up on BOP.gov, inmate locator, it says life. And then, yeah, there's lots of people serving life sentences for non-violent drug crimes as well.
Now let's talk about what some of those crimes look like. So, Jimmy, for you got a life sentence. What
drugs, no phone calls, no wiretaps, no nothing. Somebody got in trouble.
Hearsay.
Somebody got in trouble that didn't have nothing to do with me and just said, hey, this guy does this and this guy does this. And they built a case on just people's word. That's what they did. And I got a life sentence just off somebody's word.
If we want to talk about a word too, you originally took a plea deal for 2 years.
Yes, in the
So,
state.
and then
In
you
the
got locked
state.
up for life. What happened?
Nothing happened. I was in jail.
Yeah, but
So
how
the
did
feds
tell me
just
what
came.
happened?
This guy brought me, he ended up bringing me in the state. He brought me some large money. And then the state came and got me. I ended up taking an offer for 1 year in work release. So I'm doing my 1 year in work release, no ties to nobody. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm totally done. And 10 months later, the feds come and get me. And take me down to Texas. Another thing, I get indicted out of Texas. I'm from Indiana. I've never stepped foot in Texas ever in my life until the feds took me down there with this indictment that carried 10 to life. And then throughout the arrangement, the prosecutor never came to my attorney with any kind of plea deal, offer, whatever. So I actually one day had him, hey, will you go talk to the prosecutor and at least see if they're going to offer me something, you know? So he went there and he said, well, they said they'll give you 30 years. So I was like, you know, I'm 55. I just had a birthday this week. I'm 55 years old. I've been home for a little over 5 years now. So I was 39, so that would have put me at about almost 70 years old. So I don't think that that was a deal. So I took it to trial, and I ended up getting life, which 30 years to me was life.
Yeah, and I think I just want to really underscore how much when we say that these are non-violent crimes that are getting sentenced this way. Ross, he built a website. He got a double life sentence, and what really stuck out to me was in the sentencing, what the judge said. And the judge specifically said the reason that she was giving him double life plus 40, no possibility of parole, was because of his dangerous ideology, free market ideology, right? And so, speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, she actually said that in the sentencing.
You'll read the court transcript.
And, you know, she said they were dangerous. I think she's dangerous, but dangerous philosophy and of
What's the
freedom.
philosophy?
It was the non-aggression principle that if you want to trade with someone and you're not hurting anybody else, you should be able to do it. And that's basic libertarian philosophy. And she said this is extremely dangerous philosophy, and basically had you put away for life so that he couldn't spread this terrible philosophy. I mean, that's basically what she was saying. And it seemed to me like a First Amendment issue. But our lawyers, and I guess they were right, they were like, nah, that one will fly. The First Amendment will fly. I mean, it seemed pretty obvious to me. But no, that wasn't a good angle. I think they were probably right. And so, yeah, double life plus 40 years. And it was not a sentence that was, people gasped in the room when she said it. And there was a lot of criticism amongst the legal people, but that was the sentence.
I think there's a
And
lot
there's
of.
no parole. There's no hope except presidential, clemency. That's it. So we're all sick of your benefits of that.
Yeah, let's talk a little.
Actually, Trump.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What is it like when you, I mean, Travis, you got sentenced to 11 years, Jimmy, you got life, Lyn, you're thinking about your son being raised, and you hear that, and it's like, how does that weigh on you when you get a sentence like that? What is life feel like?
I remember I got 11 years when I was 21 years old, and it was hard. I can't imagine what a life sentence would be. I always had hope. I was bummed about the 11 years, and then they forced me into the plea agreement. So if you don't take the plea, you get 20 years, and I was 21 years old. I've never been arrested for it. Well, I've been arrested.
If I may, I'm just gonna give a little aside on here, my own little thing, but we talk about how you have a right to a jury in this country, but it's less than 3% of criminal cases go to jury because they push it into plea deals where you're looking at, you're gonna get this amount of time, it's a massive amount of your life, or you're gonna lose pretty much your entire life if you try to exercise your constitutional right to defend yourself.
Let me say real quick, our lawyer said, well, yeah, if you you go to trial, you pay a trial tax, which is known in the legal profession. You'll get worse.
Yeah.
Usually it's good to take the deal, because you'll probably get a much worse and harsher sentence. This is our justice system.
Yeah, yeah. Did they offer Ross any deal or no?
No, I mean, it was written that he did turn down a deal, but that's not true. And we got actually the prosecutor even went to our court, because we were hoping they had offered a deal, and somehow we didn't hear about it, but he testified that we never offered a deal. He would have taken the deal, believe me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to get out, and you don't have any other options. You go in and take it, and then you understand. So I got caught with 700 pounds of weed, and this is how the justice system works. So I was, me going to prison for 700 pounds of weed would have been great. I got 5 years, but then the driver said, "Oh, I drove packages for Travis the last year," and then they added up, and all of a sudden I'm going to prison for 5,000 pounds of weed, a thing called leader organizer. So instead of 5 years, it goes to 11. And you just learn about all this stuff before it's too late.
Jimmy, what about you? What is it like to get, you think you're finishing up at work camp, you're gonna get out, you're gonna go back to your family, and now suddenly you're living a life. What happens?
Well, I can't really explain what happened, but man, all I know is they do a precinct investigation, so you actually kind of know what they're going to give you before your actual sentencing date. It's still a recommendation, and the guidelines are supposedly not, they're advisory, but they go with them. And when the precinct's investigation, they look at everything. So, I don't know what they really do, but they said they look at everything, your history, everything, all like that. And like I say, I was a first-time offender, and they come to these guidelines from your criminal history and your charge. And like he said, they get enhancements, and they jack it up as high as they can, because the enhancements that they give at sentencing isn't like when you go to trial. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. When you get sentence enhancements, it's just by the preponderance of the evidence. Well, the judge is the one to say the preponderance, if there's enough evidence or not the jury. So you're hit either way that goes. So then the precinct's investigation, you get that back in the mail, and it says what they're recommending to the court. Well, mine came back and said they're recommending life according to these guidelines. And that's the first time I really knew that I was getting life. And I knew it by getting it in the mail. So, didn't want to call my mom and dad, because I didn't know what to do myself at that point. So I just thought about it for a few days, prayed on it, and then just kept it moving. Because I didn't believe that piece of paper. I believe in something higher than that. And I always did. I kept my head up, didn't get in the game. I'm 55 years old, did 11 years in a maximum security state prison. I don't have one tattoo. Not one.
I don't either.
I stood my ground, and everybody knew what I walked with and how I walked, and they respected me for that. And with a sentence like that, I told them I'm going home one day. Thank you, Trump, I did.
He was like, "Mom, I'm never going to kill myself. Don't worry. Just go home, And but he said, when there's life, there's hope. And just always kept that,
Keep it moving.
Yeah, and did what he could to contribute to the people there and all of that. And and of course I prayed constantly. There were people all over the world who were, I really believe that it was something that was divinely led and inspired. And so it's really a miracle. It really is. And so yeah, it's overwhelming, but there's always a chance, and so he and I both go into that. There's life, there's hope. And but it's rough. It's very, very rough. You talked about that this last FreedomFest. Some little torture and other things. Just being here is torture.
What is it like? Yeah, what is that like to be, to be in prison, to be visiting your son in prison, all of this? Most people just don't know.
No, I mean, how could you? I certainly did for a short time than that. And that showed Ross, his point was, this is torture. You're stealing someone's life, especially non-violent people who haven't hurt anyone, who we don't have to be protected from. That's what prisons are for, is to protect us from people who, kill us or whatever. And there are those people.
And those people get shorter sentences.
Often do. But to me, it's like the dungeon model that, you throw them in a dungeon and just keep them there. Hey, this is 21st century people, we can do better, and protect people or have them pay retribution, but not take them away from their families and take their whole life. It's ridiculous.
So one of the things you talked about a little bit was hope, right? It takes a lot of hope to think that you're going to be able to get clemency, right? And it takes, maybe a higher power, maybe some miracles, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of things. Like how were you able to get clemency, Jimmy? How's Ross able to get clemency? What happened?
Well, I ended up getting sentenced. I went through trial, so it took about a year and a half. And I'm in Texas. My family's from Indiana, so I'm not seeing them. And I ended up getting sentenced and got the life sentence. And right away, my sister started advocating. She started making videos and calling people, and just doing whatever she could. She didn't know what to do, but she found a way to figure out how to do it. So then she got a hold of, I hate mentioning advocate groups because I will leave one out, but they all know who they are. So she reached out to everybody, and most of them jumped on board, some more than others, and they just seen that it really was an injustice, and they ran with it for me. They really did. Not that it ended there. That was in 2012. I didn't get out till 21, so it wasn't like it was easy. It was a battle for them, and it was a battle for me inside, calling home, hey, you heard anything? Hey, you heard anything? I know I just drove them crazy, but when you got that little hope out there, and you're hearing that people are actually spreading your name, and somebody's actually working for you that don't even know you, it's a blessing. It really is. It helped keep me going. I know you had people too.
Oh, not really. I was just in my time. Yeah, my family stuck with me, but I can't
That's
imagine.
not that common. A lot of people's families.
They leave them, and with the life sentences, it's just a big difference when you have an outlay. Because federal prison, I was in federal prison for sure, and to be in those harsh, gray concrete walls and metal I commend you, especially when sticking with your son and fighting, and it's just really amazing that he got out of there, because there's no appeals. It's all kangaroo court once you get convicted. They just make up the rules, so
Yeah, when they give you a life sentence in the feds, pretty much it's just a walking death sentence, because there is no day. It's a pine box. If you don't have any family, they got a place behind the prison that they bury the people if they don't have families. So it's real.
Yeah.
It's 100% real. I've seen them take people back there and get buried. I've watched it.
Do they have funerals?
Through my window.
They just bury
No, there's no family around. They just put them in a box and they actually put them in the ground, and that's it.
I do know with the hope for cannabis prisoners, everybody was really excited about Joe Biden, and he completely let us all down.
Yeah, we got 2 pardons. People ask me this all the time when I talk about this. But weren't there pardons? There were, but they didn't let a single person out of prison.
Yeah, he was a big failure, and he was signaling to the cannabis community that he was going to let people out. He had that famous quote in the debate with Cory Booker where he said, "Free all the cannabis prisoners." So for 4 years, we got absolutely nothing.
I'm going to give them all clemency in the federal system. Who in the federal system has possession charge for marijuana? It don't happen. They don't. That's the state. The feds don't do that. They try to make yourself look good.
The
Don't try.
2,500 pardons was a complete, for cannabis offenses, was a complete political illusion that did nothing to address the issue of people going to prison for cannabis. It was just a lie. It was terrible.
I had co-defendant in there that was on my case. He's the last person still in there on my case. He wasn't fortunate and blessed enough to receive presidential clemency yet. So he's been in there for about 15 and a half years. His name's Kevin Harden. And he's got very bad health. He had bad heart before he even got arrested back in the early 2000s. He's about 52 years old right now. And his health is so bad, he's got blood on his brain. He has to wear a jacket, a vest that's basically an out-of-the-body pacemaker to keep his heart on the right rhythm. And one time it went off for like 24 hours. He didn't realize it. He almost had another heart attack. It's just, there's people in there. He's
And
just
he's
on
in
my...
maximum security prison. This is someone you're supposed to be afraid of.
And there's more in there. He just is on my case. It's like family to me, so that's why I'm on his case. But there's more in there. I've been to a medical facility because half of it was medical and half of it, and I actually went through it during COVID, and let me tell you, it was sad. There were people dying left and right every day. It was really sad. But the medical attention in there is zero to none. So I'm just trying to, these men need to be home. It's been too long for marijuana. They tell us, the federal government says you can go buy it legally, get a receipt, you go on the stock market, spend your money, and invest in these companies. But no, these men that sold it, just because they did 10, 15 years ago, they gotta stay in prison. Come on, make it make sense. They don't.
Travis, I'd like to hear from you because you went to prison for cannabis, you served all this time, and now you are a licensed cannabis dispensary owner in the state of Minnesota. What does that feel like? It's I talk to people all the time who've been negatively impacted by the criminal justice system. I talk to people all the time who work in the cannabis industry in all sorts of things, right? You can be a CPA, you can be HR, you can do all these different things, and it's shocking to me how little overlap there is between the two, right? So I think you're in a pretty unique position.
Yeah.
Very unique.
Yeah.
Travis.
No, I send in over 100,000 in sales tax every month to the state of Minnesota. We do 500,000 plus in sales a month. It's really discouraging when you see, because I was hurt so bad by cannabis prohibition. I served 8 years, and then you see people selling it legally, like they discovered something, and I'm just like, and they, their entrepreneurial spirit is great, but they're operating in a state licensed business, and the only reason there's value to what they're doing is because there's licensing, and the victims behind the licensing are the ones in prison for marijuana, and they always want to say cannabis, and they switch it to cannabis because people got locked up behind marijuana. It's super frustrating that people are serving life sentences, and my big thing I always say is, okay, we can get arrested for possession and go to jail for a day or 60 days, but to give somebody 20 years, 30 years for what I sell legally is it's really, really discouraging.
Yeah, the number of people that we talk to who are locked in a box, who were locked in a cell, and they're in a place like Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Where it's legal, a mile away from them, someone's moving more product in a day because they're locked in that box for it.
It just doesn't make sense, and I go back to Joe Biden, he was supposed to fix all this, so we're hoping President Trump listens and fixes, because a lot of people care a lot about this issue, a lot, and especially someone like me, I served 8 years in prison. I sell more marijuana now legally than I sold before I went to prison, for sure.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about President Trump, what he's done. He pardoned Ross, gave Jimmy some clemency, he's given other folks clemency. He helped pass the First Step Act. He's put folks like Allison Marie Johnson, the current pardon czar. She served time in prison for crack cocaine, I think 18 years. So she was in for a long time. There's been lots of these kinds of movements that have been happening. We're hearing a lot about rescheduling, as we're mentioning. It took 4 executive orders from 2 presidents to get to even having a rescheduling hearing, which the DEA is doing right now. Nobody who supports cannabis legalization is even allowed to be a part of that hearing. We were all at or some of us were at the DEA last week on this, but they're not allowing it. And even with that, even with rescheduling, that's not going to stop. That's not legalization. doesn't stop the arrests, it doesn't address these people who are still in prison. And so that's kind of why we have this letter, why we're asking President Trump to move forward on that clemency. But I'd like to hear from Jimmy, I'd like to hear from Lyn, what got clemency, what got your clemency, what got Ross's clemency, and what can we actually do to ask President Trump to finish the job here?
Well, like I said, my sister started, reached out to a bunch of advocates, and it all came down to when I talked to Alice Johnson after I got home. She came to my city and met up with me and said that she actually seen my case on social media, ran across it, dug in, and then knew some of the advocates that were already working my case, got a hold of them, and then her and Ivanka just started working on my case and just got a blessing. That's what it was, just a blessing. There really isn't nothing that you can do. You can fight, you can push, but at the end, is it going to get taken to the desk? Who knows? You just never know. There's all kinds of people fighting in that office, the pardon attorney's office. There's people that want white-collar crimes. There's people that want crypto. There's people that want marijuana. There's people who want this. They're all wanting to get clemencies, and I'm not mad at them. You know, of course, go, please, get it. I want everybody to come home that deserves it. But it's hard. You know, you can't go to a president with a list of 500 people and then sit there and you want to hear about everyone, even if it's a 2-minute talk. You don't have time for that. So I really did get blessed, but you can definitely reach out to any group, SSDP. I mean, they're awesome. They really are.
Yeah, well, we made a lot of noise, you know, I would not give up, and, you know, I had to make less moving mouth, so I just kept adding, and more people joined me, and, we made a lot of noise, and got the support of the Libertarian Party, the official support, and, also, of course, the crypto people, Bitcoin people, who, you know, had access to Trump, and lots of people.
I mean, for those of y'all who don't know, Lyn was basically on the road nonstop for the whole 11 years that Ross was in prison, going everywhere all the time, telling people about his story, getting people to care. I think that was a huge part of it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, these are human beings, you know, and so I was able to humanize his mother and her sister. That's awesome, she did that. It's like, you can hear all the statistics in the world, they're horrifying statistics, but these are human beings in there. And that's why I started MAX, which is Mothers Against Cruel Sentencing, because of the people I knew in there. And I just like, oh God, we just gotta keep going, you know, and help them, because they're sitting there, their lives are just being wasted. And
yeah, they just consider us a number in there. There's no name, we're just a number.
yeah, right.
And up here, like you said, they got faces for people.
Yeah, it's so easy to forget the prisoners. That is one of my goals, was you will not forget Ross, because I'm gonna keep making noise. And, but it is a lot to do. And, one of the things I did want to bring up was the Third Strike Act, because this is an evil act that was under the Clinton administration, and it's still, so the First Step Act mitigated it, and made it, instead of an automatic life sentence, it was your third offense, it would be an automatic 25 years. Which for a lot of the people in there, that Ross was in there with, they were so happy because they'd already done 18 years, only got a certain amount left, and that kind of thing. But if you've done it before, it wasn't retroactive, in other words. There's still people in prison serving under this really harsh law, the Third Strike Act. And a good friend of Ross, and that was in there, I had talked to his sister, his daughter was deprived of father growing up. He had a user amount of meth in his pocket. Okay, that's not good to do math. Okay, but he was a user. He wasn't a dealer. And that was his third strike. So he has life. He's been serving a life sentence in there. And Ross said, he's a good guy. You know, this is he doesn't need to be in there. Costing taxpayers, I don't know, he probably
Millions a year.
a year, and then 12 cumulatively billions. And it would have cost over $2 million to house Ross until his death in there, at least. If there's medical, which is bad as it is, it's cost. It all costs. And it's big business. And I had a Neil Franklin
They just need new things that they can criminalize so that they can keep making money off of it. Yeah.
My friend Travis always says there's a new thing. Marijuana is a new civil rights movement because the war on drugs failed. You've had marijuana at the top of the list saying that it has no medical value since 1970.
Yeah, they have millions of medical marijuana patients.
No medical values. So how can you have none and now you jump up and say, oh, it's fine? It just don't make sense. The issue of these people rotting in jail, that's what it is. That's what it is.
So I think one of the terms that I've heard all of y'all use several times has been voice of the voiceless, right? Because your stories, you both had, Lyn, you created that community coming out after Ross. There's the shirts, there's the podcast, we did all those things to constantly talk about it. Jimmy and your sister was doing that same thing. She had the church community coming out, all of those kinds of things. I think it goes without saying that played a huge part in getting your names elevated up to the point that you could get clemency, right? But there's so many people who are locked up who don't have that family support. No one knows that they're in there. We don't even have accurate numbers of who's in prison for these things because they don't report them, right? So how do we be that voice of the voiceless? I know we're coming in on the end here. Like, how do we speak up for those people? How do we make sure they don't get left behind?
I think you gotta link up with people like Lyn and Kat and Jimmy and me that know who's in there, and then I Google all the time. You can Google indictments and you can get involved. And one of the things I wanna touch on real quick is the new prohibitionists for marijuana, and the new people putting people in prison are all these big companies selling marijuana, so that
It's true, and it's worth mentioning that hemp is legalized in the Farm Bill. It's been recriminalized. It's not yet. You have until the end of October, but then it's going to be a Schedule I drug. This is going to be the largest recriminalization, mass criminalization of any drug to impact in all of our modern history, right? So and that's coming because a lot of these big cannabis companies don't like that they're paying higher taxes and capital regulation than the hemp industry, so they've gone after it because it's one damn plan.
Yeah, so just people need to just keep working on cannabis laws and marijuana, everything, and it's very interesting where we're at in America for marijuana laws. I just can't believe that people are still in prison for what I sell legally. So, and it is the big cannabis companies that are pushing to keep the people in prison.
And it's not just them. There's the beverage industry, there's pharmaceuticals, there's private prisons, there's all sorts of law enforcement unions that like to lock up hot prisoners because they're really easy to keep in prison. They don't cause problems.
Generally aren't violent, they're easy pickings. Yeah. I think a lot of it's political, where making a noise and getting, I was very focused on getting, different legislators and people who have some, clout and some connections to get on board. And many did, a lot of them didn't, but many did. And I think that helps, Rand Paul was at this conference, he was really helpful behind the scenes, Ross. Steve King, who's very conservative, but he was. And just getting different, I think politicians have a lot of voice, and if they I think personally, if Trump would make this federally legal, it would help him.
Yeah.
But I think it would be huge. A lot of people might not like it, but, you can legalize alcohol.
And that's what we want. That's what we want. We're going to fully legalize and, when we talk about getting politicians behind this, and that comes from the grassroots, it comes from those people, it comes from people talking about this, it comes from this being an issue. SSDP, we've met with every single office in the House, in the U.S. House, U.S. Senate, multiple times, and the number one thing that they tell us is, yes, we're on your side.
Yeah.
Yes, we know that our constituents agree with you, whether they're Republicans, whether they're Democrats, they're telling us the same thing. But we don't think that anyone cares enough for us to stick out our necks on this issue. That's what it is, right? So that's why we keep showing up, we keep going, we keep meeting need other people to do that. We need all of you to step up, to make it an issue, to talk about it in the media, to go and talk to your friends and family, to do things like sign this letter to President Trump telling him that you care and you want him to give clemency to those 3,000 people who are still behind bars for cannabis. And, you know, we need your help because we can't do this without that community of people.
Yeah, I was gonna say one last thing. When you're sitting at the dinner table, sometimes for a holiday, just look around and ask somebody. It might be awkward, but say, hey, you know, there's still somebody sitting in federal prison for life for marijuana. Just see what they say.
Yeah, people are shocked usually.
And if Trump doesn't do it, I don't know if it's gonna get done. As far as letting people out of prison, Trump might address this issue now. You know, like I said, Biden failed us, so.
We have to be willing to give, like, I'm not a big Trump fan by any means, but we have to be willing to give credit where it's due. And on this issue, he has been cut to more people than anybody else. We just need him to finish the job. So we're running up on time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Final thoughts, what do you want people to take from this discussion?
There's people serving life in prison for what I sell legally, it's not right.
Yeah, spread the word, sign the petition.
Yeah, and this is rights, this is not only cannabis, this is our rights. And